Ghost of Tsushima was one of the most impressive PS4 exclusives not only of 2020 but of all time. An experience that was rooted in Bushido heavy-handed gameplay mixed with precise timing and items galore to utilize, be it smoke bombs, sticky bombs, or bow and arrows. The player could go from an assassin to a brutal decapitator all in a matter of seconds. So when it was announced the director's cut version would be released on not only the PlayStation 4, but also the PlayStation 5, I was thoroughly excited to not only return into the shoes of Jin Sakai, but also tackle the newest expansion to the overall lore and action of Ghost with Iki Island. The overall open world presentation of Ghost of Tsushima offered a lot for the player to take part in, be it the main story, sub-stories, lighting lighthouses, taking part in bamboo striking, or of course duels galore. And just like the original Ghost, Iki Island also provides a lot for the player to take part in beyond the main and side stories. The returning activities such as the aforementioned bamboo strike is complemented by new activities like archery, and even a combat tournament that the player can take part in one of the towns. Exploration, just like in the original version, is grandiose and widely available for the player to take part in. After a little over 15 hours, I was able to complete all of the main missions, all of the side missions, gathered every necessary collectible and then some, as well as scoured the map to find sanctuaries, haiku spots, and Shinto temples to attain every trophy available in Iki Island. Taking control of Jin Sakai, the player enters unfamiliar territory for them, but not for Jin. For Sakai enters Iki Island, the site of his life's most harrowing moment, as his father was chopped down in front of him in Iki Island during a war that has plagued the island since. Jin goes forth to the site of where his father died in hopes of stopping a potential invading force from happening on Tsushima via Iki Island, and the main culprit behind it, the Eagle. It doesn't take long into the story's narrative that the player is introduced to what the Eagle is all about, and it transforms Jin via a poisoning that sees one of the biggest narrative changes occur throughout the entire experience that is Iki Island, and that is a variety of hallucinations that Jin suffers from depending on where the player is and what the player is doing. For example, Jin may fall off a high-level cliff, suffer some damage, and a hallucination will break out where the Eagle is speaking to him and explaining how weak he is. There will be other instances where Jin will encounter people just randomly on the road, interact with them, and have an hallucination reflecting on some of the horrific moments that happen on the Isle of Tsushima during the main game story. This is coupled by the fact that the majority of the people on Iki Island remember what happened several years ago when the Sakai clan descended on their land. And with Jin hiding his identity, he is able to hear the tales of people who suffered during his father's time on Iki Island. Jin's actions also allow for Iki Island's inhabitants to heal. The story is truly a masterful expression of loss, grief, and overall conflict that can happen when two sides from two different worlds collide, and the lasting effects that follow. From a gameplay perspective though, a majority of Iki Island's experience is very similar to what you will experience in the base game of Ghost of Tsushima. The gameplay is still rooted in the precise timing of blocking and parrying, alongside the stances that the player can switch between at any given moment to try to strike down whatever enemy is opposing them. There are two new profound enemies in Iki Island. The most noticeable is the Shaman. The Shaman is a buffing enemy that stays back and chants, and as the Shaman chants, the enemies that Jin has to face become more aggressive and start utilizing attacks more frequently that are unblockable and will have to be avoided, which means the player will most likely go after the Shaman first, but the Shaman also can attack with his spear, so the player can't be comfortable and try to just rush the Shaman and expect to kill them in a couple of blows. The other enemy variation is very minuscule but very dangerous, and that enemy actually changes stances themselves. This enemy has a shield, a spear, and a sword, and after being hit will change stance. So one minute they may be utilizing a sword, the next they will be utilizing the shield, which means that the player will have to change stances just as fast as that enemy is changing stances, keeping them on their toes and making the battles even more frenetic and exhilarating. One of the biggest woes when it came to combat is still there, and that is hit detection. There will be moments where hit detection does feel a little off, especially when Jin gets hit. On the opposite end of the spectrum, one of the biggest woes when it came to the camera was the fact that you couldn't see through certain foliage. That seems to be alleviated on Iki Island, as the camera will actually create a see-through effect through the foliage. There's also an addition when it comes to the horse Nobu. After an early story mission, the horse can now charge through enemies. When on horseback, the player can run and press L1 and charge forward, battering ramming through a bunch of enemies that does a great amount of damage, and can also set up for a critical or deadly strike on an enemy that is left standing from horseback. It's a nice little implementation that does drain the orbs that are used for healing and reviving Jin during the heat of battle. So it's something that you can't use all the time, but when you do use it, it is devastatingly effective. From an open world presentation, there was a lot that was offered in the original base Ghost of Tsushima, and a majority of that returns here, but in smaller doses. For example, the bamboo strikes are back again, but it's only 4 of them. There are only 3 haiku spots, but to make up for some of the lacking features are things like the pet sanctuary, where you can go and utilize your flute by raising the controller up and down to subdue animals and open up an area for them to live. The player can also take part in archery timed trials that, with successful attempts, can improve the concentration charms depending on how fast the player is able to shoot down the lanterns. A majority of the charms and stats that are upgradable in the base game are also upgradable in Iki Island by completing a majority of these open world experiences. Technically, the game is absolutely marvelous a majority of the time. On the PlayStation 5, there were a few frame rate drops here and there when it came to the autosave feature happening when moving around an area. The game hard crashed once, and there will be, as noted, times when the hit detection will be kind of finicky, and at times you may not even see an enemy strike coming before you're hit. What makes Iki Island, this expansion, this director's cut of Ghost of Tsushima, so fun is the fact that it doesn't do that much different while expanding upon, from a narrative perspective, what was seen in the original Ghost. Something that reinforces just how fun the original offering is, while giving the player something to grab onto for a few more extra hours of excitement and fun. The Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut and Iki Island in general is a fantastic package for those who don't have the original version. And if you do have the original version, it costs up to $30 to upgrade, depending on what you're upgrading to. If you're simply trying to play it on the PS4, it may only cost you $20 to get everything. But if you want to upgrade from the PS4 to the PS5, it could cost you upwards of $30. Now, for those who may be saying that the $30 price tag is pretty hefty, but the fact is that Iki Island is essentially the size of the first act of Ghost of Tsushima. So the feeling of having this grandiose experience with a brand new narrative and more gameplay options makes this well worth your money if you enjoyed the original Ghost of Tsushima. But if you didn't, this will definitely not change your mind, and it's not worth purchasing at all if you didn't like the original Ghost of Tsushima. But if you are a fan of the base game of Ghost of Tsushima, this is a no-brainer and a worthy purchase, especially if you want to go into Ghost mode and prove that you're the baddest samurai in all the land.